Hey guys, my name's Radek. I'm your TA for Economics 1 BO3, and this is Chapter 9. It's a relatively short chapter, so you won't have to put up with me very long for this video. So here we'll be discussing international trade and the gains that can be capitalized on with trading. So earlier we looked at how specialization can benefit if trade is present, so now let us look at how countries can do the same thing, because according to this principle, countries can benefit. So an open economy. What's an open economy? An open economy is an economy in which there are economic activities between domestic communities and the outside, and they're able to trade goods and services with other people and businesses in the international community. Funds and finances can flow over the borders as well. So this contrasts with a closed economy in which international trade and finance cannot take place. In contrast, we have a closed economy, and a closed economy is one which is self-sufficient. A self-sufficient economy can experience diseconomies of scale in the public and private business sectors. It is evident that several nations in the world do not have direct access to certain raw materials such as oil, coal, gas, wheat, or fabrics, such as wool, due to geographical boundaries, including climate, location, land size, and population numbers. Therefore, the production of scarce resources becomes a relatively expensive and a large cost to consumers and firms that need to pay a higher price for these goods and services. So, if you don't remember or you haven't covered what economies of scale are, let me remind you what they are. Economies of scale in microeconomics refers to the cost advantage that a business obtains due to expansion. There are factors that cause a producer's average cost per unit to fall as the scale of output is increased. Economies of scale is a long-run concept and refers to reductions in unit cost as the size of a facility and the usage levels of other inputs increase. Diseconomies of scale are the opposite. Economies of scale is a practical concept that may explain real-world phenomena such as the pattern of an international trade, the number of firms in a market, and how firms get too big to fail. The exploitation of economies of scale helps explain why companies grow large in some industries, kind of like Walmart. It is also a justification for free trade policies, since some economies of scale may require a larger market than is possible within a particular country. So we'll start off here. An economy that is closed and not trading. It will find equilibrium prices to sell its product and will determine the quantity. Here, why don't we just ignore possible taxes for the time being? So here in this graph, we see consumer surplus and producer surplus, supply and demand, and the supply and demand are domestic supply and demand. So now, let us suppose that the world price is above our domestic price and an economy opens up for trading. So this is where we see globalization, and globalization is a process that reinforces the concept of the comparative advantage as regions of economic exchange become more integrated across the world, due in part to the rising influence of international economic bodies such as the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, and trade agreements between nations with different degrees of industrialization. So, we see that producer surplus increases. All of a sudden we have these three green areas with our producer surplus. And the producer sells a good at the world price, which is a higher price. But clearly not everyone benefits. And so I pose the question, why doesn't everyone benefit? Well, since the world price is higher than the domestic price, the producers will sell the good at the new price, since a single market is too small to affect the world price. This benefits the domestic producer but hurts the domestic consumer. So why is trade good? Well, the total surplus in the economy increases. The benefit outweighs the loss in this economy, so trade is overall good. So even though the consumer has to pay a higher price, overall utility, overall efficiency is actually gained with open trade. But not all hope is lost for the insignificant consumer. Let's look at what happens when the world price is below domestic price. So here we see the graph, and we have the world price being below our domestic equilibrium price. And when the world price is below the domestic equilibrium, Then this is when the amount of imports our local economy begins to import, and we see producer surplus has taken a hit, but consumer surplus overall has increased, and efficiency and utility is gained from trading yet again. So what about when we have tariffs? Actually, I'm going to show you one more graph, and this is when the world price is above domestic equilibrium price, and this just shows how we calculate the amount of exports that that a country is exporting when the world price is above their domestic price. So now let's move on to the last part of our discussion, which is tariffs. So theorists tend to view tariffs as distortions to the free market. Typical analysis finds that tariffs tend to benefit domestic producers and government at the expense of the consumers, and that the net welfare effect of a tariff on an importing country is negative. Normative judgments often follow from these findings, namely that it may be disadvantageous for a country to artificially shield an industry from world markets, and that it might be better to allow a collapse to take place. Opposition to all tariffs is part of the free trade principle. A tariff is used to limit the number of imports and move the cost of an imported good closer to that of what the economy used to sell it at. Tariffs, like other taxes, create deadweight losses. And when we look at our diagram here, these two orange triangles are the deadweight losses that a tariff will create. So the first red line that we have here is the world price. The red line above it is the world price plus the artificially imposed tariff. QSFT means the quantity supplied at free trade. QDFT is the quantity demanded at free trade. QD tariff is the quantity supplied with a tariff. QD tariff is the quantity demanded with the tariff, and obviously with our Q star, that is the equilibrium quantity. Even with the tariff, we see that consumer surplus has increased just because the world price was below the equilibrium price. So that's really it for Chapter 9. Please do review these graphs, they're very important, and if you need any extra help, please contact your TAs. My name's Radek, this was Chapter 9, hope it was helpful, see you in Chapter 10.